Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Jack Revell Show. So today I'd love to welcome Cameron Bellamy onto the show. Cameron is an ultra endurance adventure athlete. Now, I've taken some of those words from him and other words I've made up myself, but he is from the beautiful city of Cape Town, and he's here today to talk about his incredible adventures around the world that he's been up to for about the last decade. And it's blown me away by what I've found, and I've been wanting to chat to Cameron for a while about all of his adventures. But welcome to the show, Cameron. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jack. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, I want to just sort of ask you, what are you up to at the moment with COVID and not being able to travel much and doing all your swimming and cycling and rowing and all the other things you get up to? What's going on right now for you at the moment?
Yeah, so obviously, COVID put the brakes on the plans that I had last year, especially, and so I've been really focused and interested in doing a really amazing swim in Central Asia. I was going to try to swim across the lake Isekul, which is it's about 180 kilometers, and it'll be an unassisted swim, like same as English Channel rules. And it's alpine lake. It's beautiful. I've actually cycled past it before I could even swim, and that's been my target for a couple of years, and since my last big swim. And obviously, I left San Francisco where I usually live, and I was traveling around the world to kind of train for this swim in February, March, and obviously got locked down during that time. And I was in Cape Town, so I got to spend some time with my family, my mother and brother. And I haven't lived at home since I was 18, so it was kind of nice. But just knowing that COVID was going to put the brakes on my plans for at least a year or two, like worst case scenario, I decided I wanted to just pursue a passion project of mine. So I eventually made it to Australia. I have Australian citizenship through my father, and I've always wanted to study quantum physics and quantum physics. And I have a bit of a background in math, but I've always loved physics. I'm very much self-taught, but I wanted to study it formally. So I'm actually just currently enrolled in a Masters of Physics, specializing in quantum physics at the University of Queensland. And it's obviously quite challenging. And so that's taking up a lot of my time. I'm still training and everything, and I still have these plans to swim. It's cool, if not this year, next year. But yeah, at the moment, it's actually just kind of nice to put my feet up a little bit and just hit the books and do a lot of math.
Are you gunning for a job with Elon Musk at some point?
No, it's more of I'm going to have a career already, and I'm not looking to change careers. This is definitely a passion project, but you never know.
You never know. He's doing some big things at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised. That's cool, man. So I want to just ask you, first of all, swimming, rowing, cycling, whatever the event you seem to do, it's big, it's huge, it's something that it's not just like, oh, I'm gonna just cycle from A to B. You take on some big feats. Where did all this start? What spurred you on to want to really take on these epic adventure challenges and raise money for charity and to really push yourself through those mental and physical barriers?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jack. I kind of grew up an athlete. I used to row at school level and and university. It's like similar to my brother was an amazing rower, and we both represented South Africa when we were at university and on the national team. And that was like the highlight of my life until then. That was my goal, was to row for South Africa. And I think obviously my highest goal was to row in the Olympics. But when I started representing South Africa at under 23 level, I kind of realized that it might not be a possibility. And even if I did make it to an Olympic team, it might not be that competitive. And so I made a decision to kind of focus on my career for after university and to not pursue that rowing dream. And so I did a master's, a previous master's, did my undergrad in South Africa at Rhodes University, and did a year master's in Australia in Brisbane. And then I got my first job in China. And I lived in China for 3 years, and it was like best 3 years of my life. Suddenly you have a job and you have some money and you're living in a crazy place. And it was during the Olympic period, which obviously Beijing hosted it. And so for essentially 3 years, I didn't do any sporting. I played a bit of rugby, but I didn't do any endurance sport, which is it's my strong point. I'm a good endurance athlete. I'm quite big, and I have a good. I think we've got both have good athletic genes, and I definitely missed it. And after 3 years of living in China, I was working in a big corporate and in finance and banking. And suddenly one day I I met a guy who was doing a cycling trip through Asia, and I was like, man, I want to do the same thing. So literally like a week later, I told my boss, who's an Aussie guy, I was like, his name was Webby. I was like, man, I need to get out there. And I think I've been working for 3 years, and like, I just need to get out into the world, and I'm going to buy a bicycle, and I'm going to cycle out of China. And I just basically threw that at him. He's like, wow, okay, cool. But like, when we're done, just like, give us a call. Maybe we can work for us again, somewhere else. So literally like a week later, I bought a bike, and then about 2 weeks later, I just got on my bike and I cycled, through China, through Western China, into Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, down to India, and I finished in the southern tip of India. And it was during that trip, I did it mostly by myself. And as obviously you're by yourself for so long on this amazing trip through, and you're meeting so many people, it really, I was so introspective on that trip. And I kind of realized that I loved the endurance side of like adventure. And I met so many amazing people. And I kind of also thought back to when I was a kid, like growing up in South Africa, about how I was privileged, and like how I wanted, even when I was a kid, I kind of like, I was, it's obviously in South Africa, it's very easy to see that you're privileged because there's so much poverty around you. And even when I was 8, I remember like thinking I want to make a difference one day, and then obviously you become a teenager and you forget all that. And then but I was like, this cycling trip brought all those like memories back. And then when I eventually finished that cycling trip, I ran out of money in the southern tip of India. And I called my old boss, Webby, and I was like, hey, man, I need my job back, but I don't want to go back to Beijing. Do you have anything in London or New York? And he said, like, someone's just quit in London. So if you can get a visa, you come in here, you go to London, you got a job there pretty much. And so that's what I did. I landed in London. Now suddenly I'm working in this like huge skyrise in Canary Wharf. And I was a little bit disillusioned with that, obviously, as you can imagine, after spending so much time like on my bike and on the Kazakhstan steppe, for example. And that's when I kind of decided to set up something more formal, like a foundation where I'll continue to do like athletic feats and raise money for education, especially in South Africa and Zimbabwe, early childhood development, and especially in rural areas. So that's where the idea started. So basically, I came up with like 3 things I wanted to do. And there's kind of dreams from childhood. I wanted to swim the English Channel, row across an ocean, and cycle the length of the United Kingdom. And I remember when I came up with the idea, I was actually in Cape Town on holiday, and I went to my dad and I was like, say, Dad, I want to do these 3 things. I want to cycle the length of the UK. And he like nods. And I said, I want to swim the English Channel. And he's like really like blank stare on his face. And he's like, and I want to row across an ocean. And he's actually flips out and he's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, you're gonna swim the English Channel? And I was like, I thought you'd be like concerned about the ocean rowing thing. I think it's a lot more dangerous. And he's like, no, you'll be fine doing that. But like, you've never swum before. Like, he's right. I never like swam at all. Like, and I could swim, but I never swam at high school or university, and I never trained in swimming. And I was like, yeah, no, I can train. I can do it. Anyway, like 8 months later, I just scraped it across the English Channel.
One sec. You went from not being able to swim at all to 8 months later swimming the English Channel.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could swim. It took a lot of coaching and
wow.
And mental, and obviously physical training and mental training too, because the water it's cold. And I did an early season swim, so extra cold. And there was a lot of factors there that kind of, had to overcome. And in the day, like it took me 16 hours. So I was quite slow back then. I had like, I think one of the keys that actually got me through that swim, I had my mother who was on the crew. And there was one point at like 14 hours in, I was so cold, the sun had gone down. The guy that I'd been actually training with and swimming with, I saw him getting pulled out the water. We did a swim at this kind of similar time, and I saw him getting pulled out the water. And I was like really having a bad mental state. And I kind of came to the boat, and I was like, I told my crew, I was like, I don't think I'm done. I think I'm going to make this one. And my friend on the boat, Hugh, was like, no, just keep going, Cameron. And my girlfriend was like, no, you got to keep going. And my mother just looks at me and she's like, there's no way you get on this boat. Like, you're not getting on this boat until you get to France, kind of pretty much. And she used a couple of expletives in there too. And so she pretty much got me across. Essentially that's where the charity started. So we did these. It took us like 3 years to complete the ocean row and the swim and the cycle. The ocean row was quite difficult, doing it financially, obviously, and logistically. But that's where the charity started. And it's kind of, once we'd finished the ocean row, like we kind of completed all our goals, like raised so much money for on the ground projects. And then I met a guy called Kevin Jennings, who, an amazing guy. I met him in London. He was Obama's, one of his main fundraisers in his 2008 campaign, and he just an amazing. He was Assistant Secretary of Education in the United States, and basically he'd been helping me have fundraisers continuously for the charity for the Ubunye Challenge. And then when I spoke to him, like again, when I came back from the rowing trip, I was like, where do we go now? Do we stop while we're ahead? Because we've completed all of our goals. And we kind of made a mutual decision to kind of like, no, let's keep going with the charity. Let's see how big we can make it, and see how far we can go, and let's come up with some new goals. And that's kind of launched me into this like new swimming career. Yeah, and obviously also like we work with some amazing partners on the ground in South Africa and Zimbabwe on the education side.
Before we go ahead, I just want to talk a bit about kind of where your head's at when you think yourself, right, I'd like to swim the English Channel. And as you said, you're not from a swimming background, you knew how to swim, but it was something that you really had to train for and work hard towards. What goes through your mind, if you can take yourself back to that place, what goes through your mind when you're sort of beginning that training, and then you're sort of halfway through that training, and then you kind of get to the point where you're about to swim the English Channel, like arguably one of the biggest, distances anyone would ever swim, let alone the stuff that you've done to date. But what's going through your mind thinking about that from the very start all the way through to when you start to swim?
Yeah, I think it's amazing coming up with like big goals, like goals that you think are impossible for you in your own mind, like, oh, I want to swim the English Channel, I've never swum before, like, and then obviously that's a very specific goal. And but then you have to realize like how do you do it? And that's like the cool part, like you're at this moment where you've never really swum before and you're unfit, and in 8 months time you want to swim the English Channel, and there's that space in between, like, how do I get myself to that point? And I think that's what really drives me to have these goals, is that uncertainty. I have to embrace that uncertainty. I enjoy that part the most. That's my adrenaline rush, I guess. And then obviously think about like, how the hell am I going to do that? So you obviously need the physical, like you need the technical coaching. So I kind of hired the best coach I could find, kind of close to Canary Wharf, a guy called Ray Gibbs, who he just taught me an amazing, very modern like freestyle technique based on like the latest like technique at the time, and with all the the marathon swimmers all swimming in the same technique, like the high elbow catch and lots of rotation. So from day one, I was kind of being coached on the correct technique. And I remember my first lesson with Ray, who's now a really good friend. He's like, I go in there, I was like, I swim in he's a endless pool. So you're swimming in place. I did like he says, like I swim for 5 minutes, and like I swim for 5 minutes, I stop and I'm like out of breath. And he's like, oh man, you swim really badly. You've got a lot of work to do if you want to swim the English Channel in 8 months. And I was like, yep. And so he just gave me drills. And so so many drills, but not so many drills. He probably gave me in total, like over a period of time, he eventually got to like 5 drills. And I still do those 5 drills. I did a 56-hour swim a year and a half ago. And the day before I did that, I was doing those drills in the pool. And
what
so
are these drills? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, I mean, I can send you a YouTube link of me actually doing them. It's just basically like swimming on your side, and with fins on, and then doing like 3 strokes on your side, 3 strokes on your side. It's very simple drills, but you need those. You need that the foundation of that technique, and those drills really instill that technique. Yeah, it's very simple. But I'm sure you've done them before in the pool too.
Well, it's interesting because the open water swimming is very different to pool swimming, as I'm sure you know. It's there's you got to deal with everything, the waves and the current and the animals and all the rest of it. So it's and also the mindset. When you're in a pool, you just follow a line, and you can kind of almost switch off, and it's almost a bit like active meditation. But when you're in the big ocean, you've got nothing to follow, so you don't know which direction you're going, and also you've got God knows what's coming at you, left, right, and center, and you've got as animals and jellyfish and everything else that's coming out. So does that not play on your mind when you're doing your swims, that you've got all this other stuff that's just, as you said, uncertain and not knowing what's going to come at you?
Yeah, of course. No, and you have to kind of train for that mentally too, to what are you going to see out there. And obviously there's a thing with sharks, like everyone's worried about sharks. I've seen a couple of sharks, especially swimming in Hawaii. I've seen a couple of beautiful tiger sharks swim by, but they were like really relaxed, and like so you kind of tell they weren't hungry. My biggest fear is the jellyfish, and so you get stung by a box jellyfish, or like Portuguese minnow was not as bad, but still pretty painful. It can really hurt you, and it's kind of could be lethal if you get stung by too many. So there's a lot of variables in the salt in the open water, and especially in the sea. Like doing a long swim, like recent Barbados and St Lucia swim. It's 56 hours in the water. You can't get out the water. And the salt is the killer. It's so from like 30 hours onwards in the salt water, your tongue is double the size, your lips are like splitting open, and it's pretty unbearable, the pain. And so and that swim especially, the salt was like my only really concern, because everything else you forget about it because like you only really focus on the biggest thing, like the most painful thing at the time. And as you say, like, if you're swimming in a pool, I love swimming in the pool. I love like following the black line and it's like a meditation. The same thing in open water. There's just obviously, as you mentioned, a lot more variables to consider, and it's a lot more, but it's also more exciting. You're much more engaged because you never know which direction you're going, unless you're obviously you're spotting. And I've done a lot of training in Barbados the last few years, and so that's really special. That's actually keeps you engaged. I was doing 24-hour swims regularly in Barbados just because. Just felt awesome, just swimming in amongst the reefs and the marine reserves, and there's so many fish, and it's like you're like in an aquarium.
Am I right in saying that you have the record for the longest circumnavigation swim, which was round Barbados?
I think that record actually got broken a lot recently. But yeah, it was at that time. And that Barbados is a pretty hard island to swim around because it sits in the middle of the Atlantic, and you have these incredible like continuous Atlantic trade winds whacking into it. And so the one side of the island is just like a sheer cliff from all like the waves hitting it and the winds. The other side of the ocean is just like a pool. One side, the other side of the island is just like a pool. And that was my first really big swim. Like I think my previous longest swim before that swim was 17 hours. That was the Molokai Channel in Hawaii. And then I went to this one, which was 41 hours. Obviously a big step. And it took me 2 attempts to do it. I failed the first time at 27 hours. And like the second time, I was like, I knew I could do it the second time. And I just kind of had the best swim of my life and managed to get around it.
What caused the failure? What was the thing that stopped you the first time around?
Yeah, good question. Hey, and I've thought about it. Obviously, I had to think about it a lot. I think for me, firstly, my training, like at my peak, I was very well trained for it the first time, probably even better than the second attempt. But it's such a difficult swim to attempt because for most days of the year, the winds on the east side of the island are about 20 knots, 30 minimum, up to 30, 40 knots. And you can't actually do the swim in those conditions because there's just too many reefs on that side. And so if waves are breaking on those reefs, you can't actually navigate the island. You have to have a flat day, and there's never a flat day. And the only time there's a flat day is if there's a hurricane in somewhere else in the Caribbean, which will suck all the energy out of the rest of the Caribbean. So it'll be like 1,000 kilometers away, or so 500 kilometers away, where there's a hurricane. It'll be obviously crazy windy and wavy. But where we are, like it'll be completely flat because all the energy has been sucked out. And so on days like that, you can actually attempt the swim. And so the first time I attempted it was early August 2018. And we waited for a month. I waited for 3 weeks, and I'd been tapering for a week. And so I basically didn't train for a month, really. And so in that month, my confidence went down, obviously my physical conditioning went down. And then I attempted the swim, and I almost had to force myself. I had way too much ego, in hindsight, regarding that swim. I was trying to swim too fast, and I was trying to get to halfway at this time, and I think my head wasn't in the right space. And eventually, because I'd swum the first half quite quickly, I got to 3/4, and I was completely dead. And it was going into the second night, and mentally I just wasn't there. And I pulled myself out because I wasn't going to be able to handle it, physically or mentally. The next I've been swimming for 27 hours. Wasn't going to handle the next 15, 20 hours. And so I pulled myself out. But then even the next day, I was talking to some of the big swimming kind of honchos on the island, and I was like, I'm going to try this again. And I was already coming back that November for a swimming festival. And the guys there were like, look, November's a really bad month. You eventually had a good day, but November's it's not the best time for the weather. And I was like, I don't care, I'm going to try. Anyway, a few months later, I did a lot of training since then, and mainly on the Gold Coast in Australia. And I came back to Barbados, and the swimming festival I was competing in was the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I didn't even do any races. They let me off, even though they were going to sponsor me to be there. But then as soon as the the Sunday races finished, suddenly there was an amazing window that just came up from nowhere that we could actually attempt to swim. And it wasn't like, well, it definitely wasn't perfect. It was actually quite bad, but we thought it was possible to try swim around in those weather conditions. And so we just, as soon as the last races were finishing at the swimming festival, I like went off. And so we had an amazing like crowd to send me off. And then I did the swim, and and this swim, I completely detached myself from anything, from the outcome. And I obviously had very specific goals about the swim, but this time around, I just completely detached myself. I wasn't trying to swim fast. I just wanted to enjoy it, and I was just present the whole way around. And I smashed it. Like, I just had the best swim ever. And I had like 30 people and 6 boats, like my support crew helping me get around the island. And we had like always had 2 boats with us, like feeding me and guiding us through, especially the reefs and the tricky areas. It was an amazing team effort, and like we came out like 41 hours later, and like I'd made it. And then suddenly I was like, man, I can go further, And once you do something like that, you're like, oh yeah, I could probably, if I train more, I could do more. And then we started setting our sights even higher. And the next idea was Cuba, Florida, which it didn't actually end up happening because we got a letter from Donald Trump's State Department saying we couldn't do it like 3 weeks before we were supposed to attempt it. And then we ended up doing the Barbados and St Lucia swim, which is, I think, is one of the longest channel swims in history. So that was 150 kilometers, and did that in 56 hours.
That's just, I'm just doing the maths quickly in my head. That's not only insane, but also quick. And I just, what I'd like to ask you is, what do you remember most from those big swims? 10 hours in, 15 hours in, 20 hours in, your mind must be going all over the place into some crazy places, but also some same places. Like, what do you remember most when you look back at that time?
Yeah, no, there are obviously quite a few memories. In terms of like the thought processes, like I'm usually in the beginning of swims, I'm thinking way too much. It's not really my mind races a lot, and I always have too many thoughts, but eventually like your mind settles down. So like that. And so the English Channel, I remember like I think about my thoughts raced for like 4 hours when I did this last Barbados and St Lucia swim. I was probably like, my thoughts were going crazy for 24 hours, but eventually your mind will settle down, and you just like meditate. And you also get to a point like for the St Lucia Barbados swim at about 30 hours. I remember like I started getting really sore. Like my lips and my tongue were like really, really swollen and painful. And at that point, you can't like meditate through it anymore. Like it's just too painful, but you can like really focus on the pain and those like really painful moments, and you can almost like process that, especially because there's a lot of fear around pain. And it wants you want to stop. But if you focus and you really kind of focus on where that pain is coming from, and that fear, you can kind of like, you can mitigate the whole pain kind of process in your brain, and you almost come out of it like in a better state. So I think like, yeah, to answer that part of the question, like the second half of the swim especially, it's always like, it's just a meditation. It's always focusing on yourself and what emotions are you going through, because you can never go negative. As soon as you go negative in a long swim like that, you're pretty much done. So you always have to stay like just above positive. And that's those lessons that I've learned doing these swims, as like, it's really helped me in daily life. Like when something's wrong, like you have like negative emotion, like you're angry or jealous or scared, like it's always, I've learned from those swims, if I just focus on that actually where that kind of emotion is coming from, especially within my own body, like I can almost like push it away. It's the opposite of repression and suppression. I feel like you hear a lot of stories, especially from endurance athletes. They said like grit is like what gets them through. But I found that grit is probably the worst thing to use, especially in these really long swims, because basic grit is basically suppression and repression, these like really kind of hard moments. And you can't do that in a long swim, because it's eventually going to come out. 56 hours is too long to just suppress, because it's eventually going to come out and you're just going to dive emotionally. But if you're continually processing these thoughts and emotions in a meditative way, that can get you through. It can always keep you positive.
Do you know who Ross Edgley is?
I love the dude. I never met him, unfortunately, but I love listening to him. We actually were we did a conference together once, and I was doing online, unfortunately, because I was going to attempt the Barbados swim the next day. So I was in Barbados. He was actually in San Francisco at the conference, and but I heard his speech was amazing, and he's a very cool dude.
Yeah, I've just recently finished his book, The Art of Resilience. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend you get a copy. It's you definitely love the way he writes about his trip around the UK, swimming around, circumnavigating, and he talks a lot about what you just said about how he takes a lot of inspiration from Stoicism and looks at how you could use the time in the water to really battle the things that are going on the land, you know. So the fear of being able to dive into the water and swim for 6 hours on, 6 hours off for 170 days or whatever he did, sounds mental and crazy, and like, why would you do that? But then at the same time, over the course of the book, he talks about how being in the water longer actually allowed him to be more connected with the water and get over those things and really focus on being calm and cool and collected, even in the worst conditions, you know, with the currents and the waves and everything else. And what you just said there was, you know, sort of, it resonates with that, because you have a lot of solitude time, you know, you're on your own for the majority of it. And also, unlike cycling or running, you could just hear the washing of the water in your ears. And, you know, I know, being a swimmer as well, it's quite meditative, even hearing that noise. So I'm sure you must forget kind of where you are half the time until you kind of see a boat. Like, oh yeah, I'm swimming.
And it's quite nice to, like, the time passes quite quickly when you're in that meditative mode. So when I'm swimming, I feed every 30 minutes. And when you're in that meditative mode, like the 30 minutes just like go so quickly, and it feels great. No, because you know you're going at a reasonable clip, and you're just these 30 minutes are coming and going like really fast, and you're cruising. But yeah, I think we're quite lucky, like me and Russ and yourself, like being swimmers, because I mean, for instance, if I go for a cycle or go for a hike or a run, like my mind races, and naturally this a lot of ego like comes up. And whereas it's opposite in swimming, like you go the other way, and it's a natural meditation. So, you know, like if you're doing like a really long trail run, like 56-hour trail run, like it wouldn't be the same nearly. It wouldn't be nearly as, I'm not going to say easy, but it wouldn't be nearly as easy on your brain, you know, because when you're swimming, you're just naturally in like a really good rhythm. When you're running, I think it would be a lot more there'd be so many thoughts, and it'd be a lot harder to manage the mental side of it.
I completely agree. I'm currently training for my third Ironman, and I get so annoyed that the swim isn't longer, because I could definitely do a lot better in the race if it was. Yeah. But I totally get that. I'm not a natural cyclist at all. I like running, and obviously swimming is my strength, but cycling, whenever I get on the bike, I feel like I'm just concentrating so hard on anything and everything other than what I'm actually doing. It's either the road or the bike itself or my gear or what am I eating next. And it's just almost more stressful than actually just sitting on a bike. So I can understand what you mean about just getting into that real smooth state and just being able to sit in that and almost having to be interrupted to, as you said, eat and change direction and, you know, halfway or whatever it might be. What do you eat? What is your favorite, you know, go-to snack / food on a big swim?
You know, most of it's pretty standard, but you know, for instance, I'll have a spreadsheet of 50. Obviously, just a menu basically for the Barbados and St Lucia swim. It's probably like, it was a long spreadsheet because it has like I feed every half an hour, and so it has like 72 or 140. Say if it's 70 hours of a menu, it'll be like 140 like records, and so it's every half an hour I'm drinking, every hour on the hour I'm eating. And usually the drink is the most important thing. So it's just generally like water and CarboPro, which is a carbohydrate maltodextrin, just a carbohydrate, and a little bit of flavor. And every once in a while I'll have some electrolytes too. But in the sea, obviously you don't need as many electrolytes because you're taking in quite a bit of salt. At least I do. So that's the drink side. And then on the food side, you know, it ranges. Like as I said, I have a menu, and it's like, there's like energy gels in there and like nut butters and stuff. There's also like chocolate bars and like yogurts and like little smoothie sachets. But my favorite thing is actually, but in Barbados, the national dish, maybe it's not officially the national dish, but it seems like it is a macaroni pie, and it's like half of it is like butter. And I just love it so much. And so I always like get the local Bajans to make me a massive macaroni pie. And I remember like the first time I ate macaroni pie in a swim, like a mom had made it for me. I was doing a 24-hour training swim, and I was halfway in. And this guy, his wife obviously cooked it and brought it to me to have some food. It was a big tray of macaroni pie. I ate the whole thing, like in one go. It was just so good, and it didn't actually sit in my stomach. I processed it really fast. So I knew, and I just felt so good after eating something like hearty and kind of buttery and full of carbs. And so since then it's like my go-to. So every dinner, like on a long swim, like the 56-hour swim, I think I had three lots of massive portions of macaroni pie, and it obviously takes you a while to eat it, but you look forward to that. It's like at 6 o'clock before the sunrise, I'm gonna have like my macaroni pie. And it keeps you motivated. Eventually, like, your mouth gets, unfortunately, too painful on these long swims, like probably 35 hours in. You can't actually eat certain things. Like, I like Snicker bars, but eventually, like, you can't. It's too painful to eat. So generally from the halfway onwards, 30 hours onwards, it's mainly like yogurts and gels and stuff that you can just just kind of swallow.
When do you know that you're ready for your next challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's always like, I'm sure you have this feeling too. Like, after a big event, you have to decompress, especially like a big event that was like kind of be built up. Mentally, you have to come down from it. Like, I mean, physically, you recover quickly if you're fit. Like, you're doing Ironmans. Like, you have to do so much training. Your body's so good at recovering. Like, you recover quick physically. I think after that 56-hour swim, probably 3 days, 4 days, I was like walking around, felt great. I wasn't gonna get back in the water, but like, I felt physically okay. But mentally, it took me, because you're slow sleep deprived from a swim like that. It took me like a month to kind of recover. On that swim, when I finished that swim, I think it was in September. We had planned a rowing expedition to Antarctica in December. And so I always knew I had that coming up. But it was quite nice just taking a month off. And because I expected that row to happen, like it was going to happen, like it was being logistically planned. We had like documentary crews coming with us. It was definitely going to happen. So I took a month off and then started training for that. But generally, like, after doing a big event, it probably takes like 3 or 4 months. And then and I always have like ideas. Obviously, you're always thinking about what's next, and you always have ideas. But then suddenly something will click, and I'll be like, I'm going to do that. And then as soon as you have that like clear, specific goal that I kind of spoke about in the beginning, like, it's a crazy goal. It's so uncertain. It feels impossible in your head, and you're really looking forward to that, like training and uncertainty and getting there. Once you have that excitement and that specific goal, then it's like you're all in, and you start, and then you have the motivation to start training for it.
So what drives you? What drives you to keep getting out of the water, resting for a month, getting back in the water, getting in the boats, continuously trying to push the boundaries of what your endurance, adventure, athleticism does?
I think it's just like, I mean, I do love the stuff. Like, I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was thinking about I was thinking about swimming, and I hadn't swum for a while because of COVID, and I almost like thought about not doing it anymore. But I said to him, I was like, I really love this stuff. I love the training. I love executing the swims. Like, obviously have to work too. So, and you're training for a 56-hour swim, for example, you're building up to training 12 hours a day. And the training is absolutely incredible. And so you can't have a normal work life. And so I've had to give up like a lot. I still work part-time, but I have a company in San Francisco, but I'm just very lucky that I'm just I can be very flexible with I do technology consulting, and I'm very, very flexible with my clients and my business partner. And like, they really support me. Even my clients, like, they're very supportive. So I'm quite lucky in that I can like work 2 hours a day on average for a month, and I can just whack out the training, and I can still make enough money to live and to pay for the swims and stuff. I don't have a sponsor or anything about it, so I'm paying for it myself. But at least I can do that, and I really enjoy my career. And so I feel like I'm just really lucky to be in a situation where I can do a job that I love, just do it 2 hours a day, and then be in the water for the rest, or be in a rowing boat, or be in the gym, or just in training and doing something I love and pursuing goals that are really high and really excite me. And then at the same time, like, I'm doing this awful, like, the Ubunye challenge was like a charity that we started, me and Kevin, and we have 16 board members involved, all like helping me. So I don't have to do much work for it. Like, they're running it. I feel like all I have to do is like do these kind of crazy swims and rows, and we make a very significant difference, like, to these communities we're working with.
How often do you go out and see what the difference you're making is doing?
I try to get back once a year. So I was recently, when I was in Cape Town this last time, as soon as the borders opened, the provincial borders opened, I went with one of our new recruits, who's Kate Mapham, who's running our kind of operations in South Africa. We went up to the sites to show her around and meet everybody, meet our partners and everybody there in the Eastern Cape in Grahamstown, which was really special. Unfortunately, with COVID, the early childhood development centers that we've helped to set up and form, they were obviously not there because of COVID. They weren't at school, but yeah, it was just nice to get up there. It's the most beautiful. Like, I love it. The area is just so beautiful, but it's so rural. And before we started working there was zero formal like early childhood development sites in the area. So kids weren't even going to school before the age of like grade 1, like. Sorry, Jack, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. That's okay.
Sorry.
We'll just hang on. We'll take just a quick pause.
Yeah.
And just give yourself a countdown and you go again.
Cool. What was I talking about? The sites, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. 3, 2, 1. So before we started working in these sites, there was early childhood development sites there. This was 2011, and now we've developed 16 ourselves, and we've helped to take on another 25 that have recently been started too. So our partners are helping to educate 650 kids a day. And we're an international charity, and we focus specifically on this on these partners in the Eastern Cape, the Ubunye Foundation. So we raise money for their projects, and it's a really special relationship we have with them. And it's just amazing going there and seeing all the teachers again, because we have quite a good rapport with them, and they obviously hear the stories about rowing and swimming, and the kids are obviously quite young, so they don't really understand. But the teachers always asking me questions about sharks and and things like that. So it's really special, seeing them and seeing how much progress has been, and how smart these kids are. When you put them in the right setting, give them the right opportunities, how intelligent they are, and how full of life they are.
What's your specific connection to that particular place in the Eastern Cape and in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, so I went to university for 5 years in the area, and it's the Eastern Cape is it's the least developed province in South Africa, and especially in education, which is already the governance of education is really poor in South Africa, but especially in the Eastern Cape. And obviously spending so much time there and having an amazing education myself there at university, I really want to do it. I really have an affiliation with the Eastern Cape. And so when you're coming up with the idea for the charity in 2010, 2011, it was always going to be education related, and it was always going to be in the Eastern Cape. We had a few Zimbabweans we had 20 athletes in the beginning who were doing stuff for us, and there was a big contingent of Zimbabweans, and I love Zimbabwe too, and so we wanted to have a Zimbabwe focus too, to make it more African. And our partners there are amazing too. They're a charity called Vimba, completely volunteer, and they do some incredible work with people. They have so much leverage on the ground there, and so we're developing for example, in concession, in this award and concession, which there's no A-level school in the area, so kids are walking 4 hours a day to get to school every day, which is obviously not conducive to learning, having kids having to walk such distances. So we're constructing the first A-level school in the ward. We just finished the sixth form classroom block. So the intake next year will be it'll be a fully functioning. It's been running for a couple of years, obviously the Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, but now we've constructed the last classroom block, and teachers are funded by the government, luckily. And so that will take a full intake of kids, and with us in November we did a 50-50. It's just amazing what you can do with a plan and goals, and great and intentions, and and obviously so much support from around the world, because we raise money in the US, in South Africa, Australia, the UK, everywhere.
It sounds amazing. I think first of all, it's great that you've got a cause to be able to do all these amazing adventures for, and I think that you also are seeing it develop as you as you compete, as you race, as you do these adventures. You know, I think it's great, and I think that you can I can see now why it drives you to want to continue doing all the things you do. And I'm sure that as you get, you know, more further down the line with your career in this in endurance athlete and swimming, you're going to find people are going to be jumping on board, and there'll be, you know, bigger sponsorships and more people wanting to get involved. And, you know, it could be something that continues way after, you know, you stop swimming or stop rowing and doing all that sort of stuff. So I think it's really, really cool. I want to talk to you about your row, the impossible row. And I want to just ask you, can you just give us a quick rundown? What is the impossible row, and how did it come about?
Yeah, I'll tell you my version of the story. So I previously rowed across the Indian Ocean in 2014 with a skipper, Leven Brown, a very experienced skipper, and we had a crew, a guy called Fian, Jamie, and then 3 others. And then it was an amazing expedition. It took us 57 days. I think we broke the speed record by about 10 days, and we saw some incredible things out there, like the storms in the beginning, leaving the Australian coast. You know, you have the Southern Ocean so close by, some incredible storms. We ran into a blue whale, almost intercepted by pirates, getting close to Africa. Like, it was absolutely a wild trip, and almost got taken run over by a tanker ship too.
Oh, hang on, can I just stop a sec? Hang on. So you ran into a whale. Awesome. You got almost taken over by pirates. You can't just glaze over that. We need to dive deeper into this one. What happened?
Fair enough. Well, I'm telling the story from the crew that were on deck at the time perspective. I was actually sleeping at the time, but I can remember coming out early for my shift because guys weren't rowing and there was so much chatter on the deck. And I came up and I was like, "What's going on?" And like the guys were visibly shaken and just talking. And so what happened? I was like, "Cam, like." This boat just came next to us and they're radioing this. We're quite close to, like, we're going in the direction of Somalia now, so the north of Madagascar, and so it is a dodgy area. Like, we knew it was going to be dodgy. Apparently this like red skiff came next to us. I'm not sure if you watched the movie Captain Phillips, but like it's one of those like pirate skiff looked just like that apparently. And they were like, the radio to us and they were like, yeah, like stop, we're gonna come on board. So we obviously didn't stop rowing. Luckily Leven, our skipper, he's this really short, stocky Scottish guy from the Scottish borders, and a really kind of tough guy, but with a very soft Scottish accent. And after they'd been badgering us for a while, they said they were a fishing boat. There was no fishing rods inside. Like they didn't have the equipment to be like a fishing boat. At least didn't seem from our perspective. And eventually, like Leven, after they kept badgering us on the radio just to stop, like Leven went to the radio and he's like, in his like Scottish accent, he's like, "We are a Navy Q-boat waiting for refuel by the Royal Navy in 10 minutes." And on hearing that, they just actually pushed off. And then, yeah, so they might have been a fishing boat, but like the guys who told me the story on deck, they were like, that definitely didn't seem like a fishing boat. And the guys looked pretty dicey. And they were like a tiny fishing boat, like in the middle of, it was still the middle of the like Indian Ocean. So we like, they must have had like a mother boat somewhere close by. And yeah, very dodge.
Do you think that pressure and that kind of adrenaline rush got you the record in the end? Pushing through that bit, you got to keep going.
Yeah, no, to be honest, like I think the weather was so crazy the first 3 weeks. We had such crazy following storms. Like we rode through a hurricane pretty much, at least the remnants of a hurricane. And we went so fast the first half of the trip that we knew we were going to break the record. We just needed to could almost like stop the boat and the current will take us across like in the record. So, but when we hit the pirates, it definitely like shook us up a lot. It's almost like being chased by a shark in a way. Like you get that motivation suddenly, like let's not mess around anymore. Like let's get the hell in. So eventually went to the Seychelles, which was the closest island and the closest like civilization at that stage. Didn't want to try go to Kenya because like the currents are all going north of that stage. If you miss Kenya in Somalia, and that's even then you're right in the thick of it. So I think it was a good decision to change course and go to the Seychelles. But yeah, no, that trip, there's a few times where I didn't think we were going to make it. Like we almost got run over by a tanker ship, which is definitely the closest I've been to like thinking I'm not going to make it. When you're a tiny rowing boat, 30, 40-foot rowing boat, and you're dwarfed by this tanker, we're literally pushing the tanker away with our oars. It's all on YouTube.
Seen some footage on YouTube. Yeah. How can I just ask, how did that happen though? Surely you've seen this thing from God knows how many miles away.
Yeah.
So how do you potentially hit something like that?
Yeah, it must seem kind of strange. What actually happened there was one of our crewmates, Shane, who's actually in Melbourne here, he burnt himself quite badly. Obviously, we're cooking food and we're boiling water to use pour into our dehydrated hiking food, and
Gourmet.
and so yeah, and so I think there was a big swell and he was boiling some water and it fell on top of him, unfortunately, and he was wearing so much gear that like this wind it's burnt him really badly. I mean, it wasn't bad, it was like first degree burns, but I've seen a rowing boat like that, it's not conducive to those kind of injuries, not a medical ward by the slightest. And eventually after 3 days of him not rowing, we looked at his wounds, or at least Levin came in and looked at his wounds, and you could see like the septicemia setting in, and so he just got straight onto, luckily Shane was one of the only guys in the crew that had like really good insurance. In hindsight, it wasn't the best idea from the rest of us not having like good insurance, but like Shane did have good insurance, Global Rescue, and they like literally 5 hours later after calling them at this kerosene tanker intercepted us going the other way. But they wanted to their strategy was to put they have obviously a crane on their boat, and so they wanted to drop the crane with a basket on the end with 2 people to the water, and we were supposed to row to this basket. But I mean, we're on a really big, like 40-foot rowing boat. We can hardly go forwards, let alone like left and right. Not maneuverable at all. And so that's where the issue came in. So we tried to go to the basket, and we were on the leeward side of the tanker, and we just got it got blown onto us, and that's why we were like had to push it off. But luckily it weren't that big swells. But if that boat even touched our boat, we would have been crushed straight away, and we would have been sucked under. It's it was pretty scary. Yeah, and we had a blue whale. But yeah, the scariest things were the storms for sure. Like some of the waves out there is absolutely incredible. Like the tail end of the hurricane that we went through, we kept rowing because we had following winds. But some of the waves, you're looking at like 30, 40-foot waves. It's just like it's hard to imagine how crazy Mother Nature is. And when you're experiencing it the first time, it's so crazy, and you're worried about your life, And I remember looking at Leven once, I think it was the first big storm, and I was scared. Like I didn't want to show the rest of my crewmates that I was scared, trying to be macho and everything. But I just wanted to know what was going through Leven's mind. He's been through, he's done 5 ocean rows before, and I'm in the stroke seat. And in these really big conditions, Leven would be like standing in front of me, looking over the bow. He's like manually steering because the waves are too big for the auto helm to handle. And I remember I looked up at him, and he had in these crazy winds, and waves are breaking on top of the boats, and he was like almost getting swept off, but he still had the smile on his face. And I was like, what the hell is he smiling about? And then eventually I asked him, I was like, I framed the question like very kind of lightheartedly. I was like, hey, Leven, like what do you think about these conditions? Are they safe or not safe? And Leven, he's got these 2 pieces of rope in his arms, and he's like steering, and he pans over the horizon and the waves, and he looks down at me, and he's like, in his like thick accent, and he's like, well, Cam, I don't really know, but put it this way, nobody else would be rowing in these conditions right now. And he said it's like smile on his face. And I was like, you're sadistic, man. Like, it didn't make you feel any better, but it was nice to see that he was happy. And it was funny because that was the first storm. They went through another huge storm. And then the third storm was the biggest. But eventually you get used to it. You don't think, the third storm, I went going out for our sessions, we were rowing 2 hours on, 2 hours off the whole time. You go out for your session, especially at night. And suddenly you don't think you're going to die, and suddenly now I think I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through this one, and so that then obviously brings us forward to probably 3 years ago. So that's 2017. Our crew has kind of largely kept in touch, especially me and Jamie. Jamie's a Scottish kid.
Got rid of the pirates.
Yeah. Yeah, Jamie's this incredible dude. He's the most fun guy I've ever met, and he's typical Scotsman, just crazy. And he eventually loves the storms too. First storm was we were scared, and by the third one we went through, we were cheering and trying to catch the waves and stuff.
Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that scene in Forrest Gump where they've bought the shrimping boat and they've gone out and it's gone stormy, and Captain Dan is sitting at the top of his mast, and he's got his legs hanging over, and he's just God, go for it, and you're driving through the storm. That's what I'm imagining these guys to be
it's
like.
It's pretty much like that. Hey? Jamie was as soon as, because we have a speedometer next to us too, and so whenever we surf a wave, we can see the speedometer just like suddenly jumps like 15 knots. And whenever we broke our previous record, like Jamie would be like screaming for joy. He's like, we got 15 knots, and he was like screaming, and yeah. And so we used to row really hard in the storms, especially with the following waves, to try to surf these waves to try to break our speed record.
Must be
which is
amazing.
nuts because these waves are like 30 foot, and so you're literally surfing a 30 foot.
You've almost got to take yourself out of that. You got to just be like, I'm never going to experience this ever again in my life, so I've just got to enjoy it rather than be scared by it, because otherwise, you know, it's you're going to regret later on, be like, actually that was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and those memories will stick with us. And then suddenly, like in 2017, I get this call from Fian. And so Fian was on that row. He's this Icelandic guy. We call him the Viking. He's this long blonde hair, like massive pecs and a six pack. You see through his t-shirt. You know, it's like really thick Eastern European accent. And we call him the shaman because he has all these like crazy beliefs and everything. It's an amazing character. You should get him on your show. It'll be an interesting talk.
I'd love the introduction. If you can make that happen, I'd love to have him on.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. Anyway, he calls me up, and that was I think his second row that he did. He previously broke the Atlantic record. He wrote that's an Indian Ocean. We broke the Indian Ocean record, then broke the Pacific record. He did a record row in the Arctic, and so now he wanted to. He calls me up and he said like, and Jamie has spoken to me about this plan too, but like Fian's like wants a captain and organize a crew to row the Drake Passage from South America to Antarctica, which is like the craziest by quite a distance, the craziest body of water in the world, because you have the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Southern Oceans all converging. This kind of narrow 600-mile passage, and obviously the Southern Ocean is notorious for huge seas and huge waves and winds. And so, and Fian calls me up. He's like, "Hey, Cam, like I'm planning this." He's speaking his deep accent. He's like, "Hey, Cam, like I want to do this row to Antarctica." And I said, do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, but of course, like sign me up. And I was like, how much is it going to cost again? And he's like, oh, I think it's, probably like $20,000 US. And I'm like, I'm paying for this myself. So like, but I'm like, I don't care. I'll find the money from somewhere, Anyway, like, but in my head, I'm actually thinking it's probably be closer to 30, 40, because like it's 20,000 seemed like quite low. Anyway, that was by the by, like the money didn't matter to me. I was like, I'll find it somewhere, I just really want to be involved in like Fian's row, because Fian's this incredible dude, like the most ambitious athlete, adventurer I've been associated with. His techniques are quite unconventional, as you can imagine, but he always gets us, always get across with him. He's a strong dude, mentally and physically. But yeah, no, so that's where it started, like 2 years before the actual row happened, 3 years ago. And we recruited some other guys, amazing guys, Andrew Town and John Peterson they were both collegiate rowers at Yale University. Andrew's gone on to do the 7 summits, so an adventurer, great rower. John was a principal at a charter school in San Francisco. Just incredible dude. Like he captained the Yale rowing team, and he's just like a very genuine guy. But he hasn't done much other than rowing. So he's like doing this creative little experience, but he was like one of the strongest guys on the row. He just has this amazing and strong personality. But he also has like a 2-year-old kid at home, so he also has the most to lose. And it was interesting seeing the dynamic of him kind of signing up for the row and being nervous about it. Yeah, it's in his family. But like, yeah, I think like it actually made a big difference to us having him there, because like he just had a really good calming influence on us, and he helped us to all be kind of vulnerable with each other and to be very helpful and like to do the row for each other. I think Andrew and John both had that amazing effect on us. Just that's 2 amazing guys. And then the last guy to recruited, the most amazing dude was Colin O'Brady, who's he's an incredible athlete. He used to be a professional triathlete, and he's done the 7 summits in the fastest time. He walked across Antarctica, and now he's on this row with us. And I remember like reading about Colin. I heard about him before, then I read about him like after I spoke with Fia, and then he was kind of trying to recruit Colin. And I was like, man, like, why is this guy joining us? We're a bunch of amateurs, like, and now this guy Colin is like coming on board. It's like incredible dude, like, and has such a great, amazing following. He's like almost like a celebrity athlete, And I spoke to him on the phone, and he's like so much energy. And so now we have this amazing crew. And as soon as Colin was involved, suddenly the whole row changed, and suddenly we had a number of companies like want to do a documentary on us. Whereas before we were going to be paying a lot of money, and now it's all paid for, and we have this documentary coming with us, because we actually, to go to Antarctica, you have to have a supervising vessel go with you, especially if you're in a bloody rowing boat. Like just the Antarctic Treaty, you have to have a supervising vessel. So it wasn't even a choice. And I remember first talking to Fionn about the first time we spoke was like, he's like, I think we might need to have a following vessel, but I'm going to try not to. I think we just do it on that one. So that was the intention, or just to go. Like, it's a crazy idea. But then like eventually we found out we actually had to have a supervising vessel with us. And so the initial plan was to have a sailing boat come with us. And that wasn't the best idea, obviously, because like, what are they going to do if we fall capsize in the middle? And yeah, they weren't going to do much. So eventually, suddenly with the Discovery Channel involved, suddenly the budget changed, and suddenly we had an icebreaker as our supervising vessel, and the most incredible New Zealand crew on this icebreaker. And so eventually, like, we did a test row in Scotland, and then it's just great doing like a 2-day row with the guys and meeting everybody like all together and doing some really good team building. Andrew Town is a management consultant and a very high-end like international management consultant at one of the top 4 firms and consulting firms, and so he took us through a lot of like team building exercises, which was awesome. We spent 2 days together, and it's funny because like I on that Scotland trip, I just peaked. It was 2 weeks before my Barbados and St Lucia swim, and so I just had my peak training week. So I basically did 3 24-hour swims in a week in Barbados, and then I finished the last one. I had an hour to pack. I went straight to the airport and I flew to Scotland from Barbados, like via Miami, London, Glasgow, rent a car, drive 5 hours to the Isle of Skye, and then get on a rowing boat for 2 days. Like once I'd done that, and like obviously the sleep deprivation involved with that was pretty incredible. And so I knew that I could do a 56-hour swim. But we eventually end up in Punta Arenas together, which is like the most southerly port in Chile. And we met up with Braveheart, which is the supervising vessel. We spent a couple of days packing the boat, and we got into the supervising vessel, and it took us to Cape Horn, which is obviously the sun point of South America, and to start the row. And Cape Horn is the most treacherous body of water in the world. I think up to I think it's 800 boats have sunk there, and 10,000 sailors have lost their lives at around Cape Horn. So it's infamous in the in earth and in ocean sailing mythology and like in stories. And I've always heard about, my dad always really wanted to sail, and eventually a few years before he died, he actually did get to go to Cape Horn to actually see it in person. His friends took him, so it had a big emotional connection with me. But leaving Cape Horn was quite difficult. We actually had a good weather window before a day of like really reasonably calm weather, because you have these storms, and if the storms hit Cape Horn, it's quite shallow, and so the waves get very steep very quickly, and it shoals out for about 70 miles. So we basically had to do 70 miles in the first day to get off the continental shelf, which is a lot. And so for the first day, we just like hit it really hard. We were just fast and hard as we could, and eventually got like 2 days, got off the continental shelf before the big storm hit. But we're a 30-foot boat, 27 feet, I think, and we're 6 guys. It's a 4-person boat, and we have 6 guys on it because we need a small boat. We need to be so maneuverable because the conditions are going to be so tough. The Indian Ocean is it's a long ocean. Obviously, it took us 2 months, but we were generally with the trade winds the whole time. We had to stop the boat because of adverse headwinds only twice. And this row, in 12 days of rowing, we went onto sea anchor, had to stop the boat because the conditions were too hard against us, like 5 times in 12 days. Because you can imagine, the Indian Ocean, you have the trade winds. They're always going from east to west. On the Drake Passage, there's so many low pressure storms going through there, and such crazy weather. Like the winds, you're trying to go south-southeast. The wind's never going to go south-southeast. It's going to go every other direction. And so we're always fighting the wind and going crazy crosswinds. And as soon as the wind goes against you, like anything more than 10 knots, we're such a big boat that you can't actually row. Even if you're rowing, you're going backwards. And so you put out a drogue, a parachute into the water that kind of holds our backward progress as much as possible. But now you can imagine we were 6 guys in this boat having to fit into like these tiny, tiny cabins. And the two, Fia and the captain, and Colin, the first mate, they're in the stern cabin, which is pretty small, but it's just 2 of them in there, and they're like spooning the whole time, and then they're in the cabins because now the waves are huge and it's very treacherous conditions. And the 4 of us, the other guys, the biggest dudes, are in the bow, and there's no ways you can sleep in there. If there's 4 of you, and you're basically on top of each other. 2 people, you're tight. three people literally like spooning side by side, like against one guy's against the one side, the starboard side, the other guy's in the middle, and the other guy's in the bath on the port side, and you basically just like spooning. And like four guys is actually impossible. So if one guy always had to be on deck, even during like the craziest storms, like in 40-foot waves. Because like when a storm comes through the Drake Passage, you know about it. Like you can have a Drake Lake. They call it the Drake Lake or the Drake Shake. And the Drake Lake is like awesome. I mean, it's still rough in any other kind of sea, but like then you have the Drake Shake, and it gets big quickly, and it's always like crazy, like short period steep waves, and crazy. Like I've never seen anything like it. And but luckily, so me and Jamie and Fiona have done this before. Like we've been in the storms in the Indian Ocean, and we kind of like missed it in a way, that adrenaline rush of like rowing in these crazy storms. But now you have like John and Andrew and Colin, who these guys have never. They've obviously done some amazing things and amazing athletes, but they've never been in a storm like me and Jamie hadn't in that first row. And so you could just see like the fear in their eyes. So we spent a lot of time just being vulnerable to each other before the row, because we knew we were going to expect this. And like we just remember, me and Jamie were talking to Andrew and John and Colin about like what to expect out there, and like to know that you're then there together. And like when we were changing shifts with Andrew and John a lot, me and Jamie, and every time you pass them, especially in the rough conditions, you like just give them a hug and say it's going to be over. Like one day, eventually these storms will pass, you know, and just hang on for dear life. Get your oars in the water and pull. Yeah, and I think this trip was amazing just because we had like a phenomenal crew that kind of we rode for each other. But yeah, we had 12 days to get across, five periods of sea anchor. I didn't stop the boat just because we couldn't go forward. Fiona was navigating and did an amazing job navigating to the peninsula, and the whole aim was to get through the Shetland Islands to the peninsula. Yeah, I had to go for a little swim halfway because you're stuck in these cabins all the time and like sweaty and everything. I just wanted to jump in the water, my swimming past, and like people thought I was a bit nuts, but
I have seen the footage.
The water wasn't too cold. It was like 6 degrees, and I basically just jumped in, jumped out. But the guys thought it was crazy. But I was like, it's kind of normal for me, I love swimming in cold water. Like I do love ice swimming. But then eventually got down, and suddenly we were like, you're surrounded by icebergs. They get into an hot.
It's gone again. Can you hear me? Yep. Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hang on.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure.
That's all right. I'll just hang on. Yeah. I'll just note the time. We'll just go again after. Yeah, just count yourself down and then you can go again.
Yeah, I'm still there.
Yeah, just say something.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Yeah, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so suddenly we'd gone through. We've been rowing for 10 days, and suddenly it feels like we've gone through the hell of the Drake Passage, and now we're in like Antarctica, surrounded by like icebergs. And I remember the first bit of land we saw, and we knew it was coming, but it was really foggy, and so we could kind of see it through the fog. And then my shift ended, so I went back into the cabin. When I came out for the next shift, we were actually adjacent to Smith Island, and it's an island, the most incredible sight. It basically comes up from nothing. From the ocean, it goes up to about 9,000 feet straight up, and it's just like white. It's like glacier, snow, ice, and it's got this peak goes straight up from the ocean up. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And we are just calmly rowing past it at dawn, flat conditions, and we just rowing past this island, and it was absolutely amazing. And we were surrounded by penguins, and it's those kind of like really raw memories that you'll never forget. Like, how can you compare that to anything else? And then we started going through the Shetland Islands, and killer whales are going underneath the boat and like jumping around us. Penguins are continually following us. And now you're suddenly rowing past these like huge, like cruise liner like size icebergs. The visual part of that last bit of the row was like mind-boggling. And then you almost like rode into an iceberg, because obviously we were rowing going backwards. You can't see behind you. Almost rode into an iceberg, which almost like ended our row, because we were going straight for this iceberg. And we actually, when we eventually turned around and saw where we were going, we were only like 10 meters away. We were going straight for a cave within the iceberg. So we would have pretty got wedged into this like iceberg cave. Who knows what it would have done to our boat, because obviously icebergs going up and down. I would hate to have known what would happen there. And that was only 5 hours from the finish line. And eventually, obviously, we rowed to shore, got off the boat, and we made it. And we were greeted by a lone leopard seal and a penguin on shore. And we just kind of like, obviously had to do interviews and stuff, but like I just got to walk around and like really kind of see Antarctica and experience like this. It's like Antarctic, like wonderland, like winter wonderland. So beautiful. Hard to describe the different colors, like the different shades of blue, and the animals, and it's so raw and beautiful down there.
It's one of the few places in the world that I think a lot of people would absolutely desperately go to, but it's not somewhere you can just, it's not like you can nip there on an EasyJet or a Jetstar flight or whatever. You can't just pop over. It must have been fascinating.
Yeah, and especially to go through like that whole journey of getting across and settling you there, it made it very special. Yeah, as opposed to obviously like getting a cruise liner or flying there. It was a kind of hard journey. It made you appreciate it a lot more, for sure.
All worth it. So over the years you've been doing this, it's almost a decade, right? You've been doing races and swims. What's the event or the swim or the row or the cycle or the thing that's shaped you the most to date?
I'd say probably the first cycle that I did, being by myself for so long, it definitely kind of changed my direction in life. From then, I think in terms of the athletic stuff, I failing in Barbados the first time was a big life changer. That definitely changed my mindset from more of like I realized that I think, and most men do, like to have an ego. Like everyone has an ego, I guess, but especially like men. I think growing up in South Africa too, especially, like you grow up in a kind of very macho society. And I realized that even though I probably wasn't conscious of at the time that I'd have an issue, and I had to lose that if I was going to kind of continue and do these big swims and rows and be able to cope mentally. And I'm lucky that I've been meditating since I was in my early 20s, and I suddenly had a means to which I could kind of lose the ego through the meditation. I'm quite lucky that I have a few really good role models on the swimming side. A girl called Sarah Thomas, who's she holds the current longest swim in the world. I'm trying to break her record with the Issik swim, but she's very supportive. And I speaking to her a lot about how she approaches swims, and you can see that she's the most amazing, cool girl, and she has no ego, and she just does it because she loves it. And I realized, like after speaking to her and failing that one time, that I had to kind of lose all that superficialness and the ego, and that's made the biggest difference. If you can go out and do a swim and just really enjoy it and obviously be very specific and technical about what you're doing, but also at the same time completely lose any attachment to what the outcome's going to be and just really enjoy the present, it makes a massive difference. And I don't think I could have kind of continued to do these swims, especially on the scale that I've done them, without that new mindset.
Knowing what you know now, what would you do differently if you were to have your time again?
That's a good question. If I did it all again, I think, it's hard to say because I feel like everything kind of has happened for a reason and it's kind of led me to this point. Yeah. So it's hard to kind of nail down something that I would have changed, because I think it's been an amazing journey that I wouldn't want to change. It's I think like what I just spoke about, like if I knew the kind of lessons that I have learned, especially from failing in that swim, especially about like my mental state, the mental side, like if I'd learned that a lot younger, it would been a lot different, I think that was the one thing that's been the biggest lesson I learned. And I think if I'd learned that younger, I would have done things a bit differently. Yeah. And better. Yeah.
And to date, how many world records have you got under your belt?
I think if you officially looked at the Guinness World Records, I think it'd be 9. And I think there's one pending. So I think it would be 10. Yeah.
Amazing.
I think that I did actually. So I think they're an awesome organization, but they're quite slow with some of that stuff. But they're really good at the Antarctic stuff. The Antarctic Road, they publish an amazing spread in their book, which is kind of cool because you kind of grow up reading the Guinness Book of World Records. That's so cool. And then there's an amazing cool spread of our row in there. Yeah, I mean the visuals of our row were incredible, like in Antarctica, like and the documentary that's come out, The Impossible Row, it's just came out recently on Discovery Plus in America, and I think in the UK too. It's pretty awesome, and just watching it just brought back all those memories. Yeah, I think yeah, 10 records, and like Fian had to tell me that, because Fian's the guy that's always in touch with the Guinness, and he's like, the day he's like, Cam, I think you have 10 records, and I was like, oh really? Like, I didn't know I had that many. Like, yeah, he keeps count for sure. I think Fian actually has the most Guinness World Records of anyone in the world.
Amazing.
Like 30 or 40 or something.
God, it's I'd love to chat to him. I think it'd be amazing. I feel that it's one of those things that it must become quite addictive in a way as well. Once you've kind of done one and you push yourself through such an incredible emotional, physical, and crazy barrier, that you're like, okay, that was that. What else is out there that could potentially push me even further? What else can I grow into? And so I'm sure that you must go to bed at night thinking, what else has out there to attack and to pursue.
Yeah, I think it's like most things, like in your Ironmans and stuff, like you normalize it in your own head, and then you're like, oh well, that wasn't too bad, and like let's do another one, and let's go for a better time, or yeah, it's all normalization thing. And obviously you realize that like what you're doing is like kind of crazy, like the kind of, especially when you especially like, for example, I've done an Ironman too. Like I didn't my friend persuaded me to do it with minimal training, which wasn't a good idea. I think I did it in like 13 or 14 hours. But I kind of enjoyed the process. But like, it's a crazy thing you're doing. But then you do one, and you're like, normalize it, and then like, I'm gonna do a better time next time. And the same thing with like these long swims. And I think the cool thing about just the stuff that I do is it's not competitive. I don't feel like I'm not competing with anybody. I'm just like, it's there. I want to go A to B, get across this ocean, and like you have no idea what's going to happen on the way. And it's that uncertainty that really kind of brings me back to keep doing it. Like this is a cool swim that I want to do in Kyrgyzstan. And it's obviously 180 kilometers of like swimming in this like alpine lake, most beautiful lake I've ever seen. As I said, I cycled past it on that original cycling trip through Asia. And I remember back then, I couldn't swim back then. I remember thinking in my head, I'm going to come back here someday. I never thought I'd come back to swim it. But I definitely wanted to come back, and I just can't wait to do that, for that experience of like doing that, the length of that crossing in that body of water. Yeah. It's
gonna be amazing. I think that as you said, it's just raising that bar every time. You do everything you do. Your unconscious mind becomes conscious of what then you're able to do, and you then are able to push yourself to that next barrier. Have you read David Goggins? Any of his stuff where he talks about the 40% rule, and he says,
I haven't read that. No,
it's a good. I'll send you a couple of books after this, because I really enjoy them. But he talks about in his book Can't Hurt Me that he has this thing called the 40% rule, whereby when you think you're done, you've only just done 40%. So if you just push that little bit more, that 5% extra, just that one time, next time you're done 45% and 50%. And you just basically build up that resilience inside you to be able to kind of push further every time. And so the bar just keeps getting raised and raised and raised, so that your fitness and your mental capacity is just always up there. So you can keep pushing yourself past those boundaries.
For sure. Yeah. I think that's such a good point. Yeah, the 40% rule, because we're only human beings at the end of the day. And we're a function of our emotions, and it's generally that when you hit that 40% time when you want to give up, it's more your fears and emotions that are telling you we're like, but those fears and emotions are just human reactions to certain things that have like we've grown up obviously, or through evolution, to have these thoughts and fears for good reason.
Yeah,
we don't have to listen to them.
Yeah, there's a stat that I learned that said that when we're born, we're literally born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Everything else is learnt. So somewhere along the line, we've learned to be scared of whether it's deep water or, scary objects or jellyfish or long distance rowing, whatever it might be. But, and the only way to overcome that is just to rewire your brain to understand that it's actually not the scary thing. It's your mind telling yourself that you haven't yet experienced something along those lines. So you have to put yourself through it to see that it's not that bad.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think where David Goggins is talking about that 40% rule, when you get to that point, it's like, why am I, like the point thing is ask yourself, why am I scared? And like find the root of that. And if you can do that and really focus on it, you actually realize that it's just like, it's something external to you. You don't have to listen to it.
Yeah.
Like the next 5%, the next 5%. Yeah.
But also a lot of people always, people have asked me during, so when I did my second Ironman. It was actually during the UK lockdown. So I was meant to go out to Nice and do a proper one there. We ended up doing a self-created one in London. So it was just literally just me and two other mates and my girlfriend and my mum and my dad kind of following around in a car. But it was pretty hectic, but it was the most lonely thing I've ever done, but taught me a lot of things about myself that I would have never have known otherwise. But when it comes to doing those things, you know, you put yourself into such a state leading up to it, and the build up and the training is almost worse than the actual day. And so when people say, how was it? I actually say you almost you enjoy it more, because you're like, well, I've done all the hard work, you know, all the 12-hour days you've done, all that nutrition training, all that, you know, being, you know, beasted by whoever it was that was helping you in the various parts of your training. That was the bit that you're like kind of slogging through. On the day that you swam all the channels, and the day that you did the ocean row, and the day that you did the, you know, St Lucia to Barbados, those, I'm sure you enjoyed them, or you know, you try to enjoy them, because, you know, that's what you train for.
Yeah. And it's yeah, and it's so key. Obviously, as you say, you've done the physical hard work, and now it's the enjoyment time. Now you got to get out there and like experience, like for an example of an ocean swim, like I get to go experience what the ocean's going to be like, and like you can't wait to see what's going to happen out there, because you have no idea. Like the coolest thing that Barbados and St Lucia swim is, like, no one's ever swum in that ocean before. It's just this remote part of the Atlantic Ocean. And that was like, it was cool, because you kind of felt like a pioneer. But there's also so much uncertainty. Like, you don't know what the sharks are going to be like. You don't know if you're going to get stung by jellyfish. Like, I had really bad experience with box jellyfish in Barbados, where I had to go to hospital, and like didn't think I was going to make it. And now I'm in that same body of water, and like doing this like crazy 60 hour swim. And yeah, there were so many variables in that swim and so many uncertainties. Like, man, I loved it. And it was such a cool experience, like to share that with other people on the boat. We had 12 people come with us, and like we were really close still. Like, and I get text messages all the time from our group saying like, that was crazy. Like, still like my friend Mandy, she's been on all my rows in Barbados, and she's my training partner there. She's like, texted me yesterday, and she's like, man, do you remember that sunset like on the second day? And like, it was unreal. And yeah, it's nice to share these experiences with these awesome people.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, that you got to remember when you're in that solitude space of just like getting on with it, and I'm sure you had plenty of those in your swim. You got to remember that you've chosen to do it, so the choice that you've made is going to be a good one for not just you, but also the other people around you that are also supporting you. Because I think what a lot of people forget, and it's something I took from Ross Edgley's book, is that, yeah, he may have swam around the UK, but the people on the boat, the people cooking his meals, the people riding, you know, sailing the boat, and everything else, the support crew work just as hard, if not harder, just to keep you safe and alive doing your exhibitions. And so, you know, there's a lot of work and you know, support and you know, camaraderie that goes into these things, right?
Yeah, it's amazing, and you need that support to get you through. I've been so blessed with having support, like my career, like my business partner. Like, like 2 years ago, I told them that like I don't want to run the company that we were running anymore. Because I was spending so much time overseas and training. I was like, let me please, like, don't pay me a salary anymore. I just like work on contract basis. And he was just like, do it, like go and do it, like go pursue your dreams. And like we met swimming, like when we met from the Strait of Gibraltar together, and then we ended up starting a company in San Francisco together. So he's obviously super invested, and he loves the fact that I'm doing it, and he's an amazing swimmer in his own right. And so here's like, I have that support on the career side, I have support on the charity side from Kevin and like the other board members, and the training side, I always have people to train with. So yeah, it's definitely, it feels like, I mean, to one of your questions earlier, like you need like to have this family come with you for it, especially when you're doing on these kind of high level, like crazy kind of 50-60 hour swims and crazy ocean rides, and like you need to have that like family who comes with you for it and supports you.
But they also, for what I'm taking away from this whole conversation, is that people buy into you as the person doing these incredible expeditions and endurance athlete events, rather than necessarily your ego of doing them yourself. You know, people buy into the fact that you are so in love with completing these tasks for an amazing cause, that you have the drive and the passion and the energy to keep going back again and again to doing these things, even when you fail, like when you did the circumnavigation of Barbados. Doesn't matter, you did 27 hours in, but you got out and you said, no, I'm coming back to do it again. Like, that's just that, you know, if I was standing there listening to you say that, I think you're mental, you're crazy. But then you go off and do it again and you prove it. And I think people buy into that passion that you drive yourself forward with, and therefore then they get on board and become your family because of it, as well as all the support I'm sure that you have through social media and the Discovery Channel. I think it's awesome. And I think, you know, you've, as I said at the beginning, you've definitely created something that can live on longer than if you stop doing your swims. You know, I'm sure there'll be other people that would want to take over doing some work for the charity, etc. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, with the charity, it's been such a success. Just having so much amazing support from Kevin. We have a new chairman, Dan Sachs, who's also a partner at one of the top management consulting firms, and we have that amazing amazing support on the charity side. We actually raised a lot more money just through the projects that we run now, because we've been doing it for so long, and people like our donors, like, they know that we all completely volunteer, and all the money is going straight directly to the projects on the ground, and the results are like instantaneous and tangible. And so we raise more money these days just by going to donors and say, look, so we're doing this project, can you donate? And so we obviously still use the sporting events to like raise awareness and like get a lot more people involved and spread the word. But like a lot of the charity's been successful because we have this the track record, and we have great leadership and accountability. You're talking about the support the other day, like, sorry, just now, I had to mention this girl Christina, she's local Bayesian. I met her once. That was a long time ago, before my first around the island swim, and I just noticed she was taking photos of me. And but I heard about it. I knew who she was. She was like, she runs the Open Waters Festival, swimming festival there. And we just started chatting, and we became like friends, and now we're like best buds. She like runs my whole life in Barbados and does all my like PR on a volunteer basis. And she's the person like that I trust a lot, and she's on the ground, like, especially she does so much of my logistics. And like for example, the Barbados and Lucia swim, because our Cuba Florida swim was cancelled, we had 3 weeks then to plan the Barbados and Lucia swim in the same timeline. She organized the whole thing. Like, I was in bloody Scotland like rowing, and she was doing all the work on the ground in Barbados, like organizing everything from scratch, like crew and boats and like visas, and it's going, you're in a different country. And she just did that all, like. And then the second time around Barbados, like when I made it, like I remember swimming past the place that I got out the time before where I failed. And I've said some really negative thoughts, like, suddenly, because this is where I failed the last time. I have to do this last bit of the swim. It's going to be dark, and it's the second night, and I'm sleep deprived. And then Christina like suddenly I didn't expect any fashion. Christina gets in a kayak and kayaks. I didn't even know she was on the boat. I think she just arrived to help out, like, switch crew. She gets on the kayak and she kayaks out to me, and suddenly I'm looking at her, and like, because I did have one. This is the only like negative part of that whole swim, the successful time. I was like, I thought I might like stop, you know. As soon as I had that thought, I was like, my head was like, no, I'm not gonna keep going. And then I saw Christina, and I was like, there's no way in hell if I go to her and say I might think, getting out, there's no way in hell she'd even like let me near the boat. Like, she would just like keep like going, like taking the boat away, and like, you're bloody swimming this thing. Like, I'll probably argue with her for like 5 hours, and like, it just didn't seem worth it. So I was like, I'll just keep going. And then on the Barbados and Lucia swim. So that was the second time around Barbados, where she pretty much, didn't get me through, but she really helped me in that difficult situation. And then Barbados to St Lucia, one of the hardest parts about that swim was the water temperatures. Obviously, it's warm in the Caribbean, but there'd been 4 days of like no wind and really hot temperature. And I'm used to swimming at about 32 degrees, which is extremely hot for water. Like, it's as hot as seawater gets. And suddenly the water was like 32.5 degrees centigrade, which is, it's like bath water. And as you can imagine, like, as being a swimmer, like, you get up to like higher than 29, which is like a pool, I think, and you get really exhausted very fast. And luckily, I've been training in the Gulf of Mexico for the swim, so I was used to kind of swimming at like high temperatures, but not for this long, and obviously. And so my speed came down, and I was like, through the second day, when it was like at its worst, I was completely dazed and confused, from like 1 p.m., 2 p.m. And I eventually, I was losing consciousness, but I didn't tell anybody. And then suddenly the boat stopped for 1.5 an hour feeds, and I went to the boat. And Christina had her first break of like 2 hours. She hadn't seen the previous 2 hours, and she came back on deck. She thought something was wrong, and she came up and looked at me. And obviously, I have a crew of 12, but suddenly she comes out on deck and she looks at me and she's like, "What the hell's wrong with Cameron?" And she starts like screaming at the crew. He's like, "I can't believe he didn't say anything or do anything. Like, he looks exhausted. Like, he doesn't look like he's even conscious." I didn't feel like I was conscious at the time, and it took her to notice that. And like, I was pretty much done. I don't think I could have swum anymore. But then like suddenly that's brought the ice out, and I started feeding every like 10 minutes. It was like more ice, and just ice in my cap, ice in my Speedo, like just so much ice, just to like cool me down. And she eventually got me through the next 3 hours until sunset. And she saved that swim. Like, I wouldn't have made it if she hadn't come out and said and realized what situation I was in. Since then, she's obviously a part of the charity. She runs marketing and communications for the charity, and she does incredible work with like everything PR wise and newsletters. And it takes people like that to like, at least for me, like to kind of to be successful, you know.
I think that's amazing. I love that story. She sounds like an incredible person and someone who really believes in you and also the things that you're doing as well, which is great. It leads me nicely actually into one of my last questions, which is, who inspires you?
I think, I get a lot of inspiration from people like my role models is someone like Kevin, who I recently spoke about. So it's not a sporting figure. It's Kevin, incredibly inspiring guy. Kevin Jennings. So I think I mentioned that he was Obama's one of his main fundraisers in his 2008 campaign, and he worked in the White House, Assistant Secretary of Education. But to get there is the most incredible journey, because he grew up very poor in Northern California, but in a very rural area. And his dad was a preacher who passed away when he was really young. His mother was a school teacher, so not making a lot of money. So he grew up in poverty, and he knew he was gay from a really young age. And obviously went to high school, the local public school, and was bullied to the point he almost committed suicide. He's an incredibly intelligent person, and he eventually managed to get into Harvard, and then did his undergrad at Harvard, graduated top of his class, and then became a history teacher in one of the schools in like central in like New York City, and very kind of I think it's a very disadvantaged school. This is in the early 80s, and he hadn't come out as gay to his students, but eventually did, and he eventually became this teacher and this educator, and he set up a charity called Glisten, which is one of the largest like social rights charities in the world, nonprofits in the world at the moment, and he started that himself, as well as numerous charities, and so he's just basically built his career about being like an extremely nice person. Like, he's the most connected person I've ever met in my life, which is great because he's like helping to run the charity. But he's gotten there just for being the most genuine and nice guy who has like such an appreciation for life and helping people less fortunate. And when you speak to him, you have this feeling that he's such a generous person. And so it's people like that have inspired me the most, I think, in my life, because obviously I do sporting stuff, but like Kevin does so much stuff like to help change the world in a way, and it's obviously all related. To count him as a friend is absolutely just incredible, and to have him running my charity was phenomenal. Like, very blessed.
Fantastic.
Very inspiring person. Yeah.
And final question, which you may have already answered in sort of during this talk, but what is your impossible goal? What's the thing that is kind of at the moment in your head a little bit out of reach, but granted your track history could potentially be something that happens in the not too distant future?
Yeah, so I've spoken about Issaquah, which is the lake, from 180-kilometer lake, alpine lake, in freshwater or slightly saline water. That's a goal that like really I think about a lot. But then I actually have a future goal that I'm working with a couple of people. It's a rowing expedition. That's something I've actually thought about for a long time, but took a break from that. It's kind of like that thinking for a bit. But I can't actually mention what it is. I think because it's too early, and I haven't really told anybody else about it, not even my mom. So yeah, it's quite a dangerous expedition. It's a long-term expedition, but it's something I'm really excited about. But I think it's probably 2 years away, probably 2.5 years away of setting off, and it'll be probably like a 3-year expedition.
Wow.
Yeah,
Watch
so
this space.
Yeah, you probably get a picture of what it is. But yeah, it's definitely, I think with these goals, like if you find one that just sits in your brain for long enough, you have to make it happen. You have to like eventually materialize it.
Absolutely. Manifests and stays there. But man,
Yeah.
Cameron, I've absolutely loved this chat. I think it's been eye-opening. It's been amazing, and I've found that you have surpassed my expectations of what your exhibitions and adventures have been like since, from what I've read and what I've heard about from friends of yours. So thank you for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jack. As well. It's been great chatting to you, man. I really enjoyed the chat, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Where can people find you if they wanted to learn more about any of the stuff you've been up to, the Impossible Row, your charity? What's the best place to go to?
So the charity, the website's the ubunyechallenge.com, UBUNY. It's UBUNYE, ubunyechallenge.com. The word actually means teamwork or togetherness in the local language also. That's the Eastern Cape language. That's ubunyechallenge.com. It just tells you about the charity, and it's almost like all the athletic side is also like showcased there. And we have a couple of people that are also do athletic stuff for the charity, so it's all their stuff's in there too. So you get a picture of the athletic stuff, but also what we've done on the ground and the kind of the projects we've been able to fund, the one we're currently fundraising for. And then like Christina helps me on the social media side, so Cam_Ubunye is my Instagram, and then Facebook is Cam Ubunye. Those are pretty much the channels that I use. And if you subscribe to the Ubunye Challenge newsletter, we send out semi-annual reports on what we're doing on the ground, and also like the athletic stuff.
Fantastic. I will link all of that in the show notes below. And I'm sure that if anyone's listening to this and wants to reach out and ask for some tips on how to do their first channel swim or maybe their first ocean row, I'm sure they'll be in touch with you in due course. But mate, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in many more exhibitions over the years to come.
Yeah, thanks, Jack, and good luck for your next Ironman.
Thank you very much.